It's wonderful to be here. It's a great honor to be back at DLD. And with you, Günther, we have a very difficult act to follow. We're following on from the most charismatic owls in the world, bringing peace to the world. And so you're going to have to up your game, I'm afraid, with some deeper insights and maybe some anecdotes of your own wildlife. Are you ready for it?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
I want to cast the frame wider than just our stage here today. I want us to cast our vision back almost a century ago. Mahatma Gandhi asked a very prescient question. On the eve of India's independence from Britain, the colonial power, he was reflecting on his country's economic development prospects in the future, and he said, how many planets will it take if India follows the same reckless path of industrialism that Britain has used, that has already consumed half the world's resources? How many planets? If we reflect on that and cast that question to our times, the great challenge of our time, of course, climate change, as we've heard from numerous sessions thus far, yesterday and today, and we think about perhaps the emerging demographic superpower of Africa, we may be asking the question, 1 billion Africans eager, enthusiastically entering the world economy, consuming resources, energy, as is their right. At the same time, we see the superpower of today, let's say the United States, when it comes to economic superpower, moving in the direction with the inauguration perhaps on Monday towards a more fossil-intensive future. We see China, which is the world's biggest greenhouse gas emitter. Again, perhaps approaching a peak, perhaps not, but these challenges are put into sharp contrast. If Africa were to take the development path of the world's superpowers today, what will it mean? How many planets will it take? I think if we cast that global perspective, we see these questions endure through time, connecting past to present, and now from present to the future. And that's really what sustainability is about, is connecting today with tomorrow, leaving a planet worthy of our children and grandchildren. And in this complicated world with a lot of headwinds that we've heard about and we'll hear more about, what is the role of business? Günther, you're a leader here, not only locally but globally in sustainable business. Can you tell me, in these challenging times, what can business contribute to this debate, to this conversation?
Yeah, thank you for your introduction, because this connecting is exactly the topic that we need to have. We need to obviously understand there's a certain form of, let's say, planet on which we live and how we actually manage this planet, which we cannot continue. We heard crazy house. We need to move to the common sense club. I would say most of business leaders, most of owners understand this. We need to move from here to there. The big discussion is, of course, how do we move? And for businesses, one of the most important things is you need to be successful. You need to be successful here, you need to be successful there, but on your whole way, you need to be successful. Otherwise, you can never transform. Transformation and success need to come hand in hand. That's what business leaders now need to really take as a challenge.
So you set out a vision, even if the direction of travel is clear from your perspective. And we can get into some details now, because people may not know the role that your organization plays, but you're one of the leaders in the efforts to move business towards net zero, that is on emissions, climate change specifically, a global alliance. You've played a role in finance, but other entities are part of this. That's a long-term challenge. We often talk about achieving net zero emissions by 2050, right? Thinking about the Paris Accord, the UN Treaty on Climate Change, which may very well see a large participant departing in the next week or two, right? As happened previously during the first administration of Donald Trump, when he pulled America out of the Paris Accord. We have seen a number of American banks pull out of the alliance that you're a leader of, the Global Financial Alliance, GFANGs it's called, which was seen as a bright sign of the direction of change of the financial sector. So how can you lead when some of your followers don't follow? Give us a sense of the challenge of trying to keep a coalition together in complicated times.
Yeah, your point about long-term and short-term is super important here. Again, moving from here to here, you have this one. The long-term is very easy, because the long-term is here. That's the good thing, the common sense club. Moving there is so difficult for many businesses. Why? Because you actually can have your long-term view, but you need to do the reporting short-term. So at every quarter you are going to report your success.
Right.
And this is what we now start to see. Along this path, we have a context. The context is political. If all of a sudden this context changes, let's say, in this direction, that many businesses may actually say, okay, how should I continue to report short-term that I'm on this long-term path, if this is all of a sudden the context? So what many businesses now do is they say, okay, rather we take away all this communication about net zero. We get out of these alliances and do the development in silence.
This is the greenwashing point we heard about.
This is to a certain degree the greenwashing point. Yes, it is. Is that bad, per se? Perhaps not, as long as they really do the transformation long term. The big problem comes up if this short-term reporting is used as the only success measure, and then people can, of course, extract and consume, stay in this part, in this form of the planet, and then we are no longer going to see this transformation. This is a danger that we experience now, quite clearly.
So this question of short-term capitalism, right? This is sometimes attributed to Anglo-Saxon capitalism, quarterly results and sort of the pressure from investors. There is a different mindset in this side of the Atlantic than in the US, where you do have a little bit more patient capital, and even reporting requirements are different in this part of the world than in the United States. But tell us, the same demands will be there from grannies who rely on their pensions in Europe, just like the grannies in America rely on the pensions they've built up, or householders who are counting on their retirement income, right? Or the insurance funds that you are a good steward of. You still have to be mindful of returns, right? So as long as we're living in this capitalist system, you cannot be a poor steward of returns. And how do we keep you honest if it's not through looking and judging by returns, which is how companies respond to their owners, ultimately, the shareholders. What do you propose as an alternative? Are you asking for patience, patient capital, or what is an alternative you're proposing here?
Yeah, honestly, for a manager like me, long-term and patience is always the dream. All right? Leave me alone, I do my stuff. Right. A dream scenario.
But you may go, run off with my money. We don't know, or put it into bad investments, right? So there's a reason we try to keep you honest.
Yep, absolutely. So I can really relate to the point that we need to have quarterly reporting. What we need to do to really go this, let's say, transformation, we need to bring both things together. We cannot argue we take money away as a success measure. We cannot argue quarterly reporting has to be, let's say, put somewhere, let's say, into the cupboard. This will remain because this is the structure as it is. We will not get any majority to transform that part. What we need to do is we need to do our financial reporting. We need to bring in our sustainability reporting and sustainability at large. Yeah, this is really, it's climate, it's nature, but it is obviously also diversity, equity, inclusion, these topics, and we need to integrate those two things. This is what we really need to do so that we have a consistent set so that our owners, shareholders, and other stakeholders can look at this and can get a more, let's say, informed assessment of success. This is because many owners also have heard the story about Crazy World and Common Sense Club. Of course they have. Mm-hmm.
So your idea is disclosure, but more fulsome disclosure. Be better with giving the full impact of the economic activities, not just the short-term financial impact, but the impact on resources, on nature, on consumption. And then your investors can make an informed decision. And we know from the enthusiasm for green investing, for ESG, for some of the other sustainable investment trends, that people will vote with their money. People do want to see a better planet. We've heard it in the last 2 days. And so you're crafting a paradigm where you can make these two things consistent. I want to push you, though, a little bit, because you are finding your American counterparts and colleagues maybe pressured or maybe choosing to go a different way. There is a bit of a backlash, for sure, on some of the reporting trends in green investing in the US, and a number of them have left your alliance. What is the role that Europe plays, and institutions like yours, do you think, in flying the flag for the kind of mindset on sustainable capitalism that you've advocated when you do have this very important divide coming up for the next few years in the US, where important institutions may behave differently, or at least appear to behave differently?
Yeah. I do believe that really a large majority appear may appear to behave differently. One of the famous examples is, for instance, renewable energy in Texas. This is most certainly, people are not talking so much about sustainability. I'm not a Texan, and I have no clue actually what people talk about Texas. You can tell us.
I spend a lot of time in Texas, and I can promise you, don't call it green. They love wind energy, but don't call it green.
Yeah, you see, and what they do is they come with renewable energy. Texas is the state that has the biggest developments in renewable energy.
It's true.
In entire US. They overtook California.
That's right.
And why do they do this? Because economically it makes so much sense.
Right.
And this is the thing. This is the thing. The moment you have this transformation to the common sense club and you can do your quarterly reporting with economic sense, then it starts to really play out. If we continue to tell the story, we must have a sustainability transformation for sustainability alone.
Yeah.
We should not be surprised that many people do not want to follow. We should not be surprised. Let's say in capital markets, in economics at large, people want to see economic success. But Texas is an example, and many, many more, let's say, examples also company-wise are there.
Sure, and that points to a couple of things I wanted to see where your thinking comes on this. At a time when we may not see the global leadership at the United Nations because of the politics of the fractious politics we've seen. Believe me, I've spent enough time at the UN COP summits, including the recent one in Baku, to know that you're often banging your head against the wall at these summits over $100 billion in aid money or a couple of $100 billion. Transforming the energy system is a $4 trillion a year problem, not a $100 billion problem, right? That's the kind of investment capital that's required, according to the International Energy Agency, to go into the newer, cleaner forms of energy and new climate systems. And so sometimes, if it's not from the top down, what is the role of bottom-up? You talked about wind in that example, solar, we could talk about batteries, energy storage, the newer technologies, and the role of markets in all of this, bottom-up forces. Do you see them continuing, even with the top-down perhaps caught in loggerheads?
Yes. There is really loads of innovation. I mean, we do have this conference, and we have loads of information, let's say, information about innovation. So this bottom-up is clearly there. We have, let's say, lots of then also private equity investments into these. We have them here right in Munich, but we have it at large in Germany and in Europe, and even more actually in the US and China. Yeah? The PE, private equity, let's say, economy is really, to a large degree, formed now by this innovation into sustainability.
Yeah.
So that's happening, and that's clearly happening because of economic forces. Yeah? People want to make money with this. So the bottom-up is clearly happening, and this is why I also dare to say, sorry for being so blunt, there may be a president, a chancellor, whatever. Usually those people are there for 4 years. It can be sometimes 8 years. But let's say these trends, they are long-term. They are absolutely long-term. These people who are doing this innovation and then create their, let's say, their little firm, get PE funding. They want to do this not for the 3 to 4 years where there's a certain president. They want to do this really long-term. They go from the crazy to the common sense. They do, yeah.
You make a very important point. That is the length of time, the time horizon for capital. And oftentimes, especially when you think about the deeper trends that are involved in climate technologies, they don't just last 1 or 2 years. Sometimes they can take a decade or longer to come to maturity, but then power plants are running for 50 years. The grids run for decades and decades. So these are long-lived investments. The power grid, the electricity grid, is mankind's oldest but also largest machine. It is perhaps the greatest invention of the 20th century. More impactful than the internet was the humble electricity grid that even today, roughly 1 billion people do not have access to grid electricity around the world. We must remember that, right? And so as we think about these long-lived investments, capital that's matched to that could well play an important role that goes beyond political cycles. We heard yesterday from Chris Anderson, who's connected to a lot of the interesting people in Silicon Valley and the Wall Street world, looking to create a new kind of financing vehicle that will bring together bridging capital, longer-term capital to help startups with high-potential climate tech ideas find that missing middle of capital so they can get their first and second and third projects built. And because there's a difference with some of these energy technologies and climate technologies from the software revolution. Software, we love to think of 2 guys in the garage who create a quick software fix that changes the world, an app. But when we talk to the harder problems involving nature, involving climate, involving energy, it's often things you have to drop on your foot. It's often a new plant that takes $100 million to prove. And so you need new kinds of capital, longer-term capital, maybe some patient capital. And that's sort of what insurance is, isn't it? Can we talk a little bit about your own industry you know the best? Insurance is in the business of bridging risk, of pooling risk, but also connecting the present with the future. Yeah. So tell us about how insurers think about investing.
Yeah. If I may, I come in a second to the insurance thing.
Sure.
Your PE point is so important. Why? Because you described this long term, and what I would like to bring into this is also the trust component. If you create a firm and you would like to have money, you are not trusted, that's a very difficult game.
Sure.
You must. The people need to trust that you can actually create this business. And this transformation that we talk about is also so much of a trust game. This is how actually long-term investing is happening, because the investors have a certain trust in this transformation. And that I just wanted to add this because it's an important element to how can you make sense of the long-term transformation and the quarterly reporting. If you play the trust, then you can really make sense. If you lose the trust, then actually you also lose all your power to transform, to build. To insurance. Yeah, insurance is an interesting player here. You know, as all companies, we have a left-hand side and the right-hand side of the balance sheet. On the right-hand side, we do liabilities. This is insurance underwriting. So, for instance, we insure houses.
Right.
Yeah. In every regions, and then yes, I know we immediately start to talk about fires, but it is, yes, we do insure houses. And on the left-hand side, we do investments. About investments, we talked already. So I assume you are more heading towards the, let's say, underwriting part of the...
I want to get to you, because listen, let's be honest. We're living through these extraordinary fires in California, still going. Nothing on that scale has been seen, certainly in a developed economy. And that matters because there are tragedies in developing economies every day, but often they're not insured. People don't have access to the formal insurance markets. LA is one of the richest cities in the world, so there's a huge amount of insurance coverage. And even then, we're hearing, just today, there was a Treasury Department report from the United States that talked about how, again, in the richest country in the world, in some of the richest markets in the world, there may be large parts of significant regions that may be uninsurable. And the gaps that may come in insurance. So that's why I want to press you a little bit on this, since this is so topical. We're going to hear a lot more about this in the future. Do we need a different model of insurance? Do we need to think to manage climate risk, or do you think you're fit for purpose?
The insurance business as it exists is fit for purpose in a world without that dramatic effects of climate change. Then yes, it's fit for purpose. But we do have these dramatic effects of climate change.
Right.
So we need to actually talk, how is the insurance business becoming fit for that one? And I, unfortunately, need to tell you, it's not the insurance business alone. We need to adapt. What does that mean? If you are insured, then sometimes people create this picture, you are insured with a company. Yeah, in principle, this is somehow true, but honestly, you are insured amongst yourselves. This is how it works. The insurance company brings together a pool of people who want to be insured. And then, yes, you are, let's say, a careful driver, and me is perhaps, let's say, a little bit a sloppy one. If I have then the damage, then fortunately you don't have one, and then your premium and my premium together can cover the damage. That's how it works.
Sure.
Yeah? The problem is, however, if the two of us have a house, let's say, near a forest that burns down, yeah, how should that then work? Because my money obviously is used for my damage, yours is for your, or part of it, and what's with the rest of the damage? You see, the pooling does not work the moment a hazard becomes very form of prevalent systemic.
Right.
That doesn't. What I'm aiming at is we need to adapt. So if we have the problem of heavy rain and we do not adapt to the water that may gather somewhere, then insurance cannot solve this problem at large. Because insurance is all of us together. So we need to have this adaptation. We need to cut down certain parts, let's say, of wood. And I know Frauke is here, so I mean the dangerous part that is too close to houses. But we also need to have a discussion where we can have houses.
Yeah. You get to the challenging part, right? So insurance as it stands is not adequate. It cannot be for systemic challenges. We need to have a rethinking of reinsurance, maybe government backstop facilities. This has to be socialized at some level. We've already seen this in Florida, where insurers have stepped back. The state of Florida has stepped in. The problem is, often, if it's not done the right way, the state of Florida is subsidizing Granny to live in the path of the hurricane. Why? It's politically inconvenient to tell Granny that actually you should probably move out of the path of the next hurricane or the flood zone. And so politicians may need to have more courage. You talked about leadership. So we need to avoid the perverse incentives. If the markets pull back from a certain area, as they are already starting on insurable zones, we should not have public policy stepping in. There must be a humane way to do this. Encourage, educate, help pay for people to move to other places. Fair enough, right, at taxpayer expense. That would be my argument. But ultimately, subsidizing people to live in dangerous areas without making the investments in adaptation, whether it's in forest management or coastal wetlands, that seems to me a folly. We're setting ourselves up for worse and worse disasters if we do that.
Yeah, it's a downward spiral, because at a certain point in time, the money is simply used up. There is none. And this needs to be really in an equitable, it needs to be done in an equitable form. Right. Absolutely. We need to have this discussion, where can we live, how can we live, and then in an equitable form, we need to do this transformation. You see, this is not only on the business side that you have this long-term transformation part, you have it also for politics. Right. And let's say politicians who are now subsidizing, because they are in a certain election cycle, that's nothing different from this quarterly reporting that I mentioned before with business. This long-term path really needs to be described. And then leads to another element. The long-term path needs target pictures. We need to understand where we are headed at. What is it that our economy is going to look like? Very much like what is it that our business is going to look like? And that discussion we really need to have. And I dare to say, because we talk politics, there are quite some countries and regions where we do not have these forms of target pictures. Europe has a host of these type of examples.
So you bring us full circle, right? That though business can lead and must lead, ultimately, you need to have a societal agreement. It needs to come back to a vision for society that we see from political leaders who also look to the longer term, not the short term, just as we ask the same of business leaders to invest for the longer term and be transparent about it, and you will get the rewards from shareholders who care about the longer term. But you do need that vision that is really more of a social contract. I think with that, I will stop. I wanted to give you a robust and realistic assessment of the role of business, and I think we can thank Günther for having been very forthright about what business can do to lead, but also where ultimately business is one actor within society where we all have to lead, and we all have to encourage our politicians to lead for that vision. I want to end by reflecting back on Gandhi's words. When he asked how many planets, I think we know the answer. We have only one planet. We have to work harder. We have to come together. Think about that longer future. Think about the world we leave to our children and grandchildren to make this planet a viable and livable and vibrant place that they deserve, and give them a legacy as great as the ones that we were given from our parents. So please give them a nice round of applause, and thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you.